first event of the day, the 25-lap Yamaha Challenge Clubman class. And on pole position in Kart 3 is Ray Hart, the veteran New Zealander, debuting a new kart, the Kiwi kart, which he's built himself. There's the lights you can see, and they're racing. That's Hart in the lead. Behind him is fellow New Zealander Kerry Moore in car 4, also in a Kiwi. Then 9, Gavin Field, also a New Zealander again. The top 4 New Zealanders split only by the Sydney driver Chris Linsell in kart 74, and the yellow plate you can see. It's been a perfect start for this man, Ray Hart, who in the preliminary events has won all 4 of them and taken pole position with a best time of 37.95 seconds. That's 1.09 seconds under the lap record.
Not bad for a very tall man by kart standards and 36 years of age. A top international competitor. Was in Hong Kong late last year in September. And as you can see, being very close pressed by Kerry Moore. 2 New Zealanders fighting out the Clubman final.
So fast is this circuit at Oran Park today that the top 11 drivers in this class have all undercut the existing lap record in practice.
In fact, the track has been resurfaced, which has helped that, but then again, in some parts, it's breaking up a little bit and become pretty bumpy. Into the tight infield section, Bridgestone Loop. Form of Ray Hart. You can see him sitting fairly forward, plenty of shoulders and elbows into the wheel work. Then up the bridge, where up to around 120 kilometres an hour is the norm. Off the bridge, and then while they're turning right, have to come down into this Yamaha hill section, a series of S's, very, very tight and tricky indeed.
Hart has built this Kiwi kart especially for himself. It's developed to the Bridgestone tyres that he uses in New Zealand and here in Australia as well, because the relationship between tyres and the chassis is all important in kart racing. He's built this thing to be very narrow in the waist, to be able to put more pressure on the tyres, to keep the front end down and to stop it washing out in the slower corners. And he's delighted with the way it's working. But while the chassis is working well, the engine isn't his. He's actually borrowed it from a fellow competitor in New Zealand. In a recent series, he was being knocked off by his fellow competitor, Warren Vining, and was so impressed with the engine that he said, hey, listen, can I borrow it for the Castrol Kart Prix in Australia?
Not surprising that Ray Hart is quick in this area, because the Yamaha class, very similar to this, is the premier class over there. Panel beater by trade, but a kart competitor for 15 years. He didn't start till he was 20 years of age.
Kerry Moore in second position, also in a Kiwi kart, doing well to cling to the back of Ray Hart. To explain, the Clubman class is based on Yamaha engines, the KT100S engine, the piston port engine. They put out about 15 brake horsepower compared to the 20 brake horsepower karts we'll see in the international class later this afternoon.
In fact, Hart has just lapped international motorcycle rider Wayne Gardner. He's driving kart number 81, just been lapped by them, had trouble in an earlier heat. This is absolutely his first day of racing karts. There he was in the blue leathers, in that pair of karts that went before that group. He's just going up to the bridge there, being lapped now by the second place kart. Gardner decided only about a week ago that he'd like to go kart racing, thought it would develop his skills for an ultimate ambition of going car racing later. He's been going very well today, finished 6th in one heat, but he was punched off in one, so he started well down in this one, 25th grid position, and has had further problems during this race. And of course he has to be very, very careful as to what he does to ensure that he remains fit for his motorcycle career, which includes a weekend after this meeting, but prior to you watching this telecast, a superbike race in Japan.
1.65 seconds now separates Ray Hart from Kerry Moore, and that's a lifetime in kart racing because these karts are usually so close to each other. But that's the way that Hart's attacked this weekend. In fact, in establishing his pole position time, he was almost half a second faster than Gavin Field, a fellow New Zealand driver again in the Techno car. And half a second from pole to second position is really quite incredible.
In fact, one of the Yamaha engines for this class of kart, around $600, and then of course all competitors are racing on the same tyre, Goodstone, Bridgestone YAK compound tyres. So drivers in that sense are very equal. The other advantage of karting is that there is an all-up minimum weight for each particular class, which is driver and vehicle, so that a light person doesn't have an advantage as he does on motorbikes and most forms of car racing. And for clubman, it's 130 kilos with a machine that delivers probably around 15 brake horsepower.
That's our race leader, Ray Hart. Hart looks behind him and all he sees is daylight. Coming up for a big afternoon, however, because he's also competing in the international class, where he's been having his difficulties. He was T-boned by a competitor in the prologue earlier today, and it broke his disc brake on his international class of kart, and that's created immense difficulties for him. In fact, he parked this kart in the pits, this one we're watching now, and has been working furiously on his international class kart all day. So again, it's a tribute to just how well he's put this vehicle together, that it's taken almost minimal preparation today. Field takes the classic blocking line. Fleet is capable of throwing his kart wide to get up much more speed, but then loses it all in that left-hand corner because he has to brake to the pace of the vehicle in front of him, so it's of almost no advantage to take a faster line into the corner. There's an altercation between two karts, one of them kart 25, John Dark, who probably is, and having lost his opportunity in this clubman event. And the competitor slightly injured on the other side of the track, but it's very, very difficult to hurt yourself in kart racing. We come back to the dice for third position between kart 9, Gavin Field, and kart 6, Des Fleet.
Further back in the field is a 9-times Australian champion, John Pizarro. He's in 66 and that 9th position at the moment. John's been having a little bit of a problem. Drove very well recently in Hong Kong.
Oh, and look at Fleet across the top there. Is Field holding him up or what? Fleet just wants to get through. Fleet driving a thing called a hutless, which is not a New Zealand way of saying he's not wearing his bash hat. Although it could be.
Actually, it's originally a Swiss brand called Swiss Hutless. There's Pizarro. But now being made locally, a guy called David Prix. This is John Pizarro. Won't admit his age, probably mid-40s. Been karting for more than 20 years. Comes from Parkes, has a kart shop there, and a fierce competitor and a very, very successful one.
Pizarro has
in
a small
behind him, David Lawton.
Pizarro has a small surprise for us coming up later in the day, where through the magic of television we'll take you for a ride in one of these karts at high speed, but more of that later.
Zara, in fact, like a number of karters, Drew Price notably, who makes DPE karts and is now, of course, a works driver with Toyota, is in his own kart, a sprinter kart.
Zara describes himself as a farmer and kart manufacturer.
Born near here at
Parks, it's only just up the road.
No, he's born in fact, just on the western suburbs edge of Sydney, near Cabramatta. There's Wayne Gardner trying to choke the carburetor, i.e. reduce the airflow, richen the mixture, by covering the air intake, the air filter with his hand. Starting to learn some of the tricks of the trade, Gardner. Not looking at his best in this race. He's been hit twice by other drivers, including once where he reckoned he was given a really hard time. Punched off the track and rather worried about hurting himself, not because he's afraid of being hurt per se, but because he recognises an enormous responsibility to Honda, with whom he's contracted. Revealed today, Wayne Gardner, that he would very, very much like a drive in this year's James Hardy 1000. And as one other motorcycle ace seems to be headed that way, Graham Crosby having his first run in Australia in a car this weekend, the Holden Commodore he just bought from Ray Smith in New Zealand, he was sharing with Denny Holmes. Well then, perhaps Gardner could get together with somebody such as that. There he is, back in the field. Gardner's number flapping about. Wollongong Kart Centre looking after it for him. Putting it back in the shed. Perhaps one more outing before the motorcycle season starts, and then later in the year he'll be back into it again. And
starting a new fashion trend today by wearing skid pads on his knees. Unusual for a karter, but nonetheless it could come in handy.
They were the Surfers high-sider levers, actually.
4 laps remaining, in fact 3 laps remaining in this Yamaha Challenge Clubman race. And there's the leader, Ray Hart, who looks destined to be a flag-to-flag finisher, because he's some 4.7 seconds in front of Kerry Moore in second position, and that is like 20 laps in a car race. So to Ray Hart, a great run. 2 laps now to go for Ray Hart. And what a great way to debut a new kart, this Kiwi kart. And that should mean a few sales for Ray Hart when he gets back to New Zealand, if in fact he doesn't sell this before he goes.
That's a fairly equivalent debut, I suspect, to New Zealand's America's Cup yacht. About as unheralded when it got here, with about as much development behind it, but coming out straight away as a winning machine. Coming around to complete lap 24. Out now on his final, the 36-year-old, tall, lanky, bespectacled New Zealander, Ray Hart.
Just 1 corner remaining for Ray Hart now, and he comes up to get the checkered flag and win the Yamaha Challenge Clubman race over 25 laps at Oran Park. Second place goes to Kart 4, Kerry Moore. And then this race now coming up for third position will be resolved, I think, in favour of Kart 9. That's Gavin Field from Des Fleet, Kart 6.
In Kart, we're just gone over the Bridgestone Bridge, down the hill, approaching the start-finish straight. The area of the circuit where the Group A cars come at about the same speed. We go across the start-finish line, make a fairly wide right-hand sweeping turn, a fairly easy turn, about 80 or 90 k's. We now leave the main motor race circuit and deviate onto the kart circuit. See those corner markers, must be very careful. Close on the back of Drew Price, the Bridgestone driver. Another sharp left back onto the motor racing circuit. Approaching Bitcher paved corner, must be very careful. Big concrete fence there, don't want to hit it. Clip the corner up over the hill, we get up to about 130 k's. There's a big bump as you leave the bridge, hard on a cart, sharp right turn. Just saw me pat the carburetor, a little bit of safety. Down the hill, back on the start, finish straight for the end of the race.
Up And after several warm-up laps, now ready for the start of the Castrol Australian International Kart Grand Prix final. 30 laps around the 863-metre Oran Park Kart circuit. And what a quality field it is. The best from Australia, from New Zealand, from many countries in Europe and from Japan. Coming round now to the line, and they're away. Green light is late, but that's at the end of this corner, and so they're given the start. Alessandro Zanidi, number 5, leading away from Harm Schurman from Holland.
But it's Schurman in the lead. Schurman's taken over already.
In fact, Schurman, I think, is back in 3rd place. Getting at 47 there is Greg McGuinness. There's number 7, back in 3rd.
So in the lead, yes, it's Steve Gustafsson who's taken over the lead from 3rd position on the grid.
Great
Behind
start.
him now is Zanardi. And then comes Harm Schurman in 3rd slot. So a huge start from Gustafsson.
Gustafsson, just 21 years old, Swedish and Scandinavian champion in class Formula Nordic, has a very busy time indeed at the moment and has lost 1st place, so that it's now the man who is on pole position, Zanardi, who really has had the running of this international field throughout the meeting. It's been a very busy weekend at Oran Park.
Of the 4 events contested so far, Zanardi has won 3 of them and come 3rd in the other when his tyres started to go off. But it was a planned 3rd place. He knew his tyres would start to go before he even went out in the race. But the officials insist that only 2 sets of tyres be used in this racing, and so he had no option but to race on cooked tyres. But boy, what a job he's doing. Only 19 years of age, regarded as probably the fastest sprint car racer in the world after the man who couldn't come this weekend,
Stefano Modena.
Yes, indeed, who's broken his leg in a Formula 3 accident in Italy.
In fact, Zanardi was the most successful 100cc competitor in the world last year. He won 1 round of the European Championships, then withdrew from the last round so that he would not be given a super license. If he got a super license, he wouldn't be eligible for this class.
Huge racing for 2nd place there, Will. Sorry to interrupt, but what a fantastic race between Stig Gustafsson in 10 and Kart 7, Harm Schurman. Schurman almost diving underneath.
That, contrary to what you might expect from a Swede, it's not Stig, but Steve Gustafsson. Rather like Stephen Johansson driving for Ferrari.
And then there in 4th position is the 4 times world champion, Mike Wilson. Had a rotten weekend when he just couldn't get the symbiosis right between his tyres and his chassis. Has moved to Bridgestone tyres from the Dunlop soft tyres that he brought out, and just hasn't been able to get the job right. But Wilson now is really going for it in 4th slot. 26 years of age, 4 times world champion, lost it in 1984 only when he broke down with just 1 lap to go whilst leading the world title. And his ambition in kart racing is to equal the 5 times world champion record.
That's held by Francois Goldstein. And indeed, Wilson very keen to do that. He's from Barnsley in Yorkshire, same place as Michael Parkinson. But he's been living in Italy for about 8 years, ever since he started kart racing. And a very, very successful driver indeed. Having a very difficult weekend, but like the professional that he is, persevering. And the trouble has been that the Dunlops he brought with him haven't been suited to our weather conditions and track surface. The Bridgestones he switched to have been giving him too much grip on a track which is very, very sticky. And in fact, almost breaking up at that point where they loop off the bridge and come down Yamaha Hill, and also at the apex of the next corner. And so the engine's been bogging down, coming right off its power band, and he's been having a very difficult time.
The appearance of the 9 international drivers in this Castrol kart meeting today has really stirred the possum. No fewer than 26 drivers in this 32 capacity field were under the lap record in practice. And would you believe 1 second only separated the top 19. Mike Wilson still in 4th position. There's Kart 7, Harm Shurman just in front of him.
Well, if you wonder how popular karting is, there were 53 karts entered for this race for a maximum 32 possible starters. And of course through heats and pre-finals, which set the grid positions, no more than that. For this one, they've come down to a very hot field of 32. They include people like 7 times Australian champion Drew Price, now a Toyota Works driver. Did all the Group A Touring Car Championship last year and then the endurance races with John Smith. Manufactures some 400 karts a year, and throughout Australia, some 7,000 people racing karts in a population of 15 million people, where in Italy, less than half that number race karts for a population obviously many times that of Australia. We're looking at the moment, number 7, Harm Shurman, Dutchman, late entry for the meeting, and has been going very well indeed.
And as we see Zanardi go through in the lead, 3.51 seconds separates first place Zanardi back to 4th position Mike Wilson on lap 20 with, on lap 10 with 20 to go.
A man we should be watching a little bit further back in the field, but getting ever closer to the front, is Monkholm. He was the fastest qualifier, Gert Monkholm. He's in kart number 9. He started in 12th grid position. A lap ago, he was 6th. He's now 5th and flying towards the front, and still with plenty of laps to threaten the leaders. Fastest qualifier, fastest lap so far has been 35.4.
And Wilson's stopping. Wilson's out of the kart race. Just saw a flash of him on the left there. There he goes. Oh, what a great shame.
Here's Monkholm. He was the fastest qualifier yesterday. Best time of 35.42, very similar to the time just done in the race by Zanardi, 35.4. This man's flying. Look at him, leaping and jolting the kart sideways.
And should you think the Dino should be an Italian kart, in fact, it's made in Denmark by Finn Jorgensen, who is here today to watch the performance of his works karts, as indeed are a lot of the team managers and owners.
Well, first and second at the moment are DAP karts from Italy. Second, third and fourth are Dino karts. And DAP stands for D'Angelo Parilla. And he is the man that discovered Ayrton Senna, who of course now is just a sensation of Formula One car racing. And he was telling me about a friend of his who said, come and see this Brazilian. And he went and saw him race, brought him to Italy. He said, this guy really is something. In 6 laps at the very... Oh, my goodness! Monkholm, how quick is he, as we see Wilson retired in 1 in the background. Senna in 6 laps at the very difficult Palmer circuit went faster than anybody had ever been before. Still stays with D'Angelo Parilla, who I think in some obscure way is related to Parilla engines.
Not obscure at all. His dad, in fact, owned Parilla engines.
That's right, sold it out some years ago.
And then once D'Angelo had been through university, he started his own rival company.
But Monkholm really is going well.
And Monkholm in 4th position is only 3.39 seconds behind the leader, and they're bunching. So that's 3rd place directly in front of him at the moment.
Look how he's clipping corners. Look how often he gets it up onto 2 wheels. Got the Dino kart flying, but they still are 3rd and 4th. It's still 2 daps in 1st and 2nd.
Steve Gutzhafen is in 3rd position. That's him in the blue. So Monkholm is really starting to apply the pressure. Oh, power to the ground is what it's all about, not power in the air.
Toyota Works driver Drew Price is 5th in number 22, and John Pizarro, 9 times Australian champion, compared with Drew Price's 7, is 6th on 43. And at 37, Russell Becker is next, followed by number 3. And that's Russell Ingalls, who is current Australian champion.
And Shurman backs off ever so slightly from Zanardi. And the answer fairly simply is, of course, that their teammate, Shulman, was drafted into the team by D'Angelo Perilla.
Drew Price, with only 5 kart meetings under his belt last year, whilst concentrating on touring car racing in Group A, is now...
Oh, and there goes Shulman, he's off. And he's lost his back wheel.
That's
Surely
out.
he can't get round for the rest of the
Well, even if he
lap.
can, there's no way, because there's just not the time. So that's the end of the race for Hans Schurman. He might get back to the pits in terms of returning to the mechanics.
Checkered flag coming out. Checkered flag now for Alessandro Zanardi, gets the win. Second place, let's look back to it. And there he goes, he's got it. Second place goes to Kart 7, Harm Schurman. Or does it?
He did have it up to half a lap from the end of the 30-lap race, and then the left rear tyre rolled off the rim. He took to the shrubbery, regained very well indeed, and was able to limp to the finishing line, but in the process, second place had been taken by Steve Gustafsson for Dino. So he came through to second, no question about the winner. Alessandro Zanardi almost flag to flag for DAP, and then just holding on to third place, Harm Schurman, the Dutchman. The winner's average speed, 91 kilometres an hour in the 30-lap Castrol Australian International Kart Prix final.